The first man lived long enough to feel the weight of his own fall. From the day he left the garden, his body began to register every consequence. The ground no longer yielded easily. The body aged. Wounds took longer to close. The light that once surrounded him had vanished, and in its place remained a body subject to time and a world that no longer offered shelter. For nearly 1,000 years, Adam walked carrying the awareness of the fall. He saw the earth become hostile. He saw death arise within his own household. And when the end drew near, he did not leave the world to chance. He prepared his departure. He chose the place, preserved objects, and delivered a warning that would pass through generations. What these ancient texts reveal is not merely how Adam died. They reveal that his death was set in motion. A body that did not remain where it fell. A destiny that moved forward, passed through the flood, crossed the centuries, and awaited the precise moment when blood would touch the earth at the very point where everything began. It is in this symbolic place to which stories return when they still carry weight and debt, that this passage is revealed in the Valley of Redemption. The world did not receive Adam when the gate closed behind him. There was no transition, no gradual adaptation. The environment simply ceased to respond as it once had. The ground hardened. The air lost its familiarity. Silence began to occupy spaces where presence had once existed. The first man crossed the threshold of the garden and discovered that the world continued to exist without him. Every step outside Eden taught something new. The soil demanded effort. Food no longer appeared through proximity, but through persistence. The day advanced with weight, and the night ceased to be a place of safe rest. There was no invisible protection, no immediate response. Everything had to be earned, maintained, defended. The body felt it before the mind could form it. The skin became vulnerable. Fatigue emerged. Pain began to take up space. Small wounds took longer to close. Time, which had once left no mark on the body, began to accumulate invisible signs. Each dawn added something that could not be removed. According to ancient traditions preserved outside the most familiar axis of Scripture, living outside the garden was not merely survival. It was constant remembrance, a remembrance of a lost condition that could not be recreated by human effort. Adam did not lose only a place. He lost a state of existence in which creation cooperated, in which the body did not wear down, and in which divine presence did not need to be sought because it surrounded everything. The seasons reinforced this distance. The soil produced food mixed with thorns. Animals no longer approached in the same way. The world seemed to have learned another language, direct, harsh, without concessions. The man who once named everything now had to contend for space with what bore his name. That long life, later reduced to a bare number, carried a daily cost. Adam lived long enough to watch the world reorganize itself around absence, long enough to realize that the fall was not a single instant, but a continuous displacement, a process that deepened as the years passed. None of this occurred in ignorance. This is the decisive point. Adam knew exactly what had been lost because he had known it. He did not inherit accounts. He did not receive explanations. He had been there. And for that reason, every day lived outside the garden carried awareness. Not a loud guilt, but a silent weight that accompanied every movement. As his children grew, the world already operated under another logic: conflict, dispute, comparison. Violence did not emerge as a sudden shock, but as the natural consequence of an environment that was no longer whole. The first man watched creation learn something new, and that learning did not bring life. What was forming there was not merely a family outside Eden. It was an entire world attempting to function without the source that sustained it, a world adapting to absence. And Adam remained alive long enough to observe every change, every rupture, every distortion. Before death, before the warnings, before the body that would not remain where it fell, there was this life, too long to be ignored. An existence extended long enough to comprehend the loss and to carry that understanding to the end. Death did not enter the world as a visible impact. It arrived without warning, without sound, without immediate rupture. Adam continued walking outside the garden. The sun still rose. Night still fell. The body remained standing. Yet the way the world responded had changed. The presence that once filled the space no longer followed his steps. The day felt heavier, the silence longer. Creation remained, but it no longer drew near in the same way. Nothing fell in that moment. Nothing ended. Life continued, sustained only by the body. The years advanced, and the world began to organize itself differently. The children grew without any memory of the garden. For them, effort was normal. Dispute was part of living together. Food required constant labor. The environment offered no automatic protection. It was a world that taught endurance from the beginning. Adam observed everything in silence. He knew another way of existing, and for that reason, he perceived the contrast every day. Every change was clear, every loss identifiable. The world forming before his eyes was not neutral. He was learning to survive without what had once sustained him. It was in this setting that death took shape. When Abel fell, there was no immediate understanding. A lifeless body had never existed. Silence carried no known meaning. Adam and Eve approached their son. The body did not respond. The cold increased. Rigidity emerged slowly. Even so, they remained there. They called his name. They tried to wake him. They waited. Days passed without response. Creation then began to act. Birds descended. The body began to change. The smell shifted. It was at that moment that reality imposed itself with force. This was not sleep. It was not weakness. It was not something that could be reversed. It was final separation. Burying the son was not a learned ritual. There was no tradition, no words, no inherited gestures. Only earth being placed over flesh, an act carried out without knowing how to do it. As he covered the body, Adam understood something that required no explanation. The world now knew how to kill, and it would not forget how to do it. After that, time brought no relief. The following years carried the same image. Adam's body began to reflect what the world had become. Fatigue accumulated, breath shortened, pain did not disappear. Every movement demanded more than before. Life was maintained by insistence, not by flow. Death was no longer something observed from a distance. It had become a constant presence, not hurried, not violent, simply continuous, accompanying every step, every dawn, every repeated effort. It did not arrive all at once. It advanced alongside time. The man who had opened the path out of the garden now walked towards his own end, a body aging within a world that had also aged. None of this was improvised. None of this was an accident. The end did not approach as a surprise. It was beginning to be prepared. Time had left clear marks on Adam's body. His breath no longer sustained long walks. The pain did not subside. The world demanded more than before, and Adam understood that the end was not far off. Even so, there was something that needed to be done before the body gave way. Adam called Seth. The meeting was direct. A father speaking to a son who needed to listen carefully. Adam indicated a specific path, distant from the common routes, close to the regions where the garden had once existed. A high place, protected by the very formation of the land. There was a cave there. This location had not been chosen by chance. It would be a point of preservation. Adam instructed Seth to carry his body there when the end came. The body was to be prepared with elements taken from the mountain and placed inside the cave, not for display, not for visitation, for safekeeping. What would be deposited there did not belong to immediate use. It was then that Adam revealed what had been preserved since the expulsion from the garden. 3 objects had been kept out of common circulation: gold, incense, and myrrh. For Adam, they did not represent wealth. They were material testimonies of something prior to the fall. Elements linked to presence, consecration, and kingship. Fragments of a lost order kept intact through generations. These objects were to remain with Adam's body, carefully guarded, protected from the wear of time. Adam explained that they did not belong to that moment, nor to the immediate time of his children. They were destined for a specific point in history, when the world would enter a deeper period of darkness and would need once again to recognize the light. Nothing there was imprecise. There was a place. There was Adam's body. There were concrete objects. And there was a future destination. Before the end arrived, Adam gathered his closest descendants. His words were firm. He indicated that the lineage of Seth should remain in the higher regions, distant from the tribes settling in the valleys. In those lower regions, new forms of organization would arise. Sounds, techniques, and practices capable of capturing attention and shaping behavior. Adam's warning was not about territory. It was about influence. Adam understood that the world would learn to guide people without direct force, through rhythm, through sound, through habit, through constant repetition. Separation was a way to preserve what still remained of the memory of the garden. When Adam's words ceased, the environment fell silent. Shortly afterwards, the body finally gave way. Adam's heart stopped beating, aware of the path that had been prepared. His body was carried. The cave received what had been destined for it. The objects were placed beside him. Nothing there indicated a definitive ending. What Adam had arranged pointed towards continuity. Adam's body was guarded. The place had been defined, and history continued in motion. Time did not bring Adam's story to an end within the cave. The world continued to change around his body, and creation went on accumulating weight, noise, and violence. Generations advanced. Cities grew. The land was taken over by conflict, and what remained of the original order began to dissolve. Then the waters came. The rain did not fall as an ordinary phenomenon. The sky remained closed for days. The ground lost its stability. Springs burst open. The known world began to disappear under the weight of what rose and what descended. Creation, which had already learned to wound, now learned to swallow. According to ancient traditions preserved outside the most familiar text, Noah received a specific instruction before the doors of the ark were closed. Not only animals and seeds were to be preserved, Adam's body also had to be taken. The first man would not remain buried while the world was being purged. The body was removed from the cave and carried to the vessel, not as a public relic, not as a displayed symbol, as something that needed to pass through judgment alongside creation. While the waters covered mountains and cities vanished, the remains of Adam stayed protected within the ark, crossing the collapse of the world he had known. When the waters receded and the ground reappeared, the mission was not yet complete. After the flood, Shem, son of Noah, received a precise instruction. A path was indicated. A destination was revealed. Adam's body was to be taken to a specific point on the earth, a central, marked, set-apart place. Tradition calls it the place of the skull. The journey was not short. The body crossed unstable regions, territories still reorganizing, paths forming for the first time after the waters. Nothing along that route was improvised. Every step followed a defined direction. Upon reaching the destination, Adam's body was placed in the ground. Not just anywhere, exactly there. The point where, centuries later, another body would be raised above the earth. The wood was not yet present. The hill did not yet carry visible meaning, but the place was already marked. Adam's body rested there as history advanced. Kingdoms rose, languages multiplied. Peoples walked over that land without knowing what lay beneath. The world moved even further from the memory of the garden, while the first man remained at the center of this course, waiting for something that had not yet happened. None of this occurred by coincidence. The body was not moved for convenience. The place was not chosen at random. History was not moving in circles. It was advancing in a straight line. The body of Adam, who had initiated the fall, now waited for the exact point where redemption would touch the earth. The path had been traced. The ground had been prepared. Time continued moving towards the moment when blood would fall upon the very place where the first man rested. The body was in the right place. The world did not yet know. Time moved forward without announcing what was about to happen. The hill remained there, passing through generations without any visible mark of what it held. People walked over that ground. Peoples passed by. Conflicts arose and faded. Nothing on the surface indicated that beneath it, the body of Adam lay at rest. Then the day arrived. The wood was raised. The sky darkened. The air grew heavy. A body was suspended above the ground at the very point where the first man had been laid centuries earlier. The execution was not silent. There was tension, noise, military presence. Death now took place before many eyes. When the blow pierced the side of the body, something broke the surface. Blood and water flowed down the wood, touched the soil, and penetrated the earth. The tradition preserved outside the most familiar axis affirms that this liquid descended through fissures in the rock until it reached the place where Adam rested. The blood touched the bones of the first man, not as a distant symbol, as a physical meeting between two moments in history. The body that had initiated the fall received what brought the course to its end. The blood of the last man touched the body of the first. The point where death entered the world became the point where redemption reached the earth. Nothing there was improvised. The place had already been prepared. The body had already been positioned. Time had already been traversed. What unfolded before people's eyes was a common execution. For those who carried the preserved memory, it was the closing of an arc that began in the garden. The earth, which once received the body formed from dust, now received the blood that restored the meaning of creation. The hill was not chosen for convenience. The blood did not fall by chance. The meeting was not accidental. Adam's body remained there as the world continued on its course, waiting for that exact moment. The wood above and the bones below belonged to the same story, a long, silent, continuous path. When the body on the cross was taken down, the ground remained marked. Not visibly, but structurally. The earth had been touched at the precise point where everything had first begun to unravel. The fall and redemption had met in the same place. Nothing more needed to be added. The path was complete. The body had been reached. The blood had touched the earth. The world moved on without perceiving the weight of what had occurred there. But at that specific point, history had been set right. The first man was no longer alone at the center of the fall. The last had crossed the entire path to reach him. After the blood touched the earth, history moved forward as it always had. Cities grew, peoples moved, wars were fought. The world continued to function without announcing what had been adjusted at that specific point in the ground. Adam's name remained confined to the earliest accounts, while the weight of his journey faded from common memory. There was, however, an absence that was never fully explained. Eve. The most familiar records mention her name at the beginning. The fall, the birth of the children. After that, silence. No description of the end, no date, no clear burial. The tradition preserved outside the most widespread text does not treat this silence as oversight. It treats it as choice. While Adam represented the visible rupture, the beginning of separation, the weight of consequence, the path of death, Eve remained associated with continuity, with generation, with the endurance of the lineage. Her story does not end at a defined point because her function was not tied to closure, but to transmission. According to these traditions, Eve remained alive after Adam's death. accompanying the lineage of Seth, preserving the memory of the garden and sustaining the hope that the course would not end in the fall. She did not carry the role of guardian of the body. She carried the role of guardian of the promise. The silence surrounding her end does not erase her presence. On the contrary, it shifts the focus. The story ceases to observe death alone and begins to follow what continues despite it. The lineage advances. Time moves forward. The promise remains in motion. Adam's body fulfilled its trajectory. From the garden to the cave. From the cave to the ark. From the ark to the hill. The blood touched the earth at the exact point where he rested. The ark was closed. But humanity did not end there. The inheritance that remained was not merely memory. It was direction. The world continued to move away from the garden in appearance, yet carried in depth the mark of the adjustment that had been made. Each generation came to live within that interval, between the fall that had already occurred and the redemption that had been set in motion. None of this eliminated conflict. None of this removed the weight of existence, but it altered the meaning. Death ceased to be the absolute endpoint. It became part of a larger course already carried through to its conclusion. That is why this story did not survive in centers of power, nor in the most condensed versions of the text. It demands time. It demands attention. It demands a willingness to see the past as something still in motion. Adam's body rests. The blood has already touched the earth. The lineage continues. The world goes on existing within this interval, a space where the fall was acknowledged, the path was traversed, and redemption was set in motion. It is within this space that stories return when they still carry weight. It is within this space that memory finds adjustment. It is within this space that the valley of redemption takes form. Adam's story does not end when the body ceases to respond. It continues because what Adam opened was never closed on its own. Adam left the garden carrying awareness. He lived long enough to understand the reach of his own fall and spent the years watching the world reorganize itself around that loss. Every generation that came after walked on the same soil, breathed the same hardened air, and inherited the same original distance. Adam's body followed a path that mirrors that of humanity itself, from the garden to hostile ground, from the cave to the waters, from the waters to the center of history. Adam's body was not forgotten because what it represents never ceased to act. The fall remained operative. Time only expanded it. When the blood touched the earth at the point where Adam rested, something was adjusted at the deepest level of history. It was not a visible spectacle. It was not a public announcement. It was a silent meeting between origin and completion. The path begun by Adam found its response in the very soil that had received his body. This does not remove the weight of existence. It redefines where that weight stands. Pain remained present. Time continued to demand its cost. The world stayed imperfect. Even so, history began to carry a direction. Adam was no longer isolated at the center of the fall. The course he opened was carried through to its end. Every life that followed came to exist within this interval. A space where loss is acknowledged, where the path is walked with awareness, and where redemption does not erase the past, but passes through it. The world remains harsh because the fall was real. The world remains open because the path was real as well. To think of Adam is to think of origin, but also of responsibility. History did not begin clean and does not proceed neutrally. Every choice echoes. Every silence carries weight. Every step continues to right something that did not end in the past. That is why this narrative does not seek immediate comfort. It demands reflection. It demands time. It demands the courage to look at one's own trajectory as part of a greater course, begun long before and still in motion. Adam's body rests. The blood has touched the earth. The path remains open. What remains now is the space where stories return when they still carry weight and ask for reckoning. A symbolic territory where memory does not flee from the fall and does not ignore the possibility of redemption.